Hello BookTube, Sarah here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my weekly reviews for November the 3rd through the 9th. So I finished 5 books this week and 2 of them were for Nonfiction November. For those of you who don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Nonfiction November is a read-along, readathon, hosted by the lovely Olive over at Book Olive. She does this, I think this is the 5th year in a row that she has done this, and she has 4 categories for Nonfiction November. And I will leave link to her original announcement video in the description box below, so she can explain it far better than I could. Essentially, the short and skinny of it is that she encourages you to read more nonfiction in the month of November. So if you never read any, read at least 1 book. So I did finish 2 of these books were for Nonfiction November, and also as per usual, I will leave timestamps in the description box below if you want to jump ahead to only hear about certain books. So let's jump in and talk about the books that I finished this week. So the first one that I read was Empty Mansions by Bill Dedman. This was a nonfiction historical novel, narrated on audio by Kimberly Farr. This was published in 2016, average rating on Goodreads of 3.77 stars. I gave this one 4 stars. And for Nonfiction November, this one was my extra book. I did have an extra book. I actually had 2, one that I talked about in my Nonfiction November TBR. Don't know if I'm going to get to it or not. Still debating on reading it or not. But this one was an extra pick because I didn't hear about this one until after Olive had done this recommendations video, and she talked about this book and I was so intrigued. So it's about a woman by the name of Eugetta. I think it's Eugetta or Eugenia. It's H-U-G, but I know the H is silent. We'll call her Mrs. Clark. That she is the daughter of one of the wealthiest men for his time that you've never heard of. He made his money in copper piping, I believe it was. He found copper beneath the soil in Montana and made his vast fortune. And essentially this book is about how she spent that money. And it was fascinating. And in Olive's recommendation video, she talks about listening to this one on audio. If you are an audiobook reader, to definitely try and pick this one up on audio. And luckily enough for me, my library had a copy of it available like right away for me to borrow on audio. So I did. And I loved it because there are certain points in the book where you're actually hearing from her in her own voice. It's delightful. I mean, absolutely, what a great use of the audiobook, media to be able to do that. I thought it was fantastic. The co-author on this one, I believe, is Mrs. Clark's nephew or great-nephew, and some of the conversations are between him and her. So they're phone conversations. I believe there's also a few that are like left on his answering machine and stuff like that. So absolutely delightful that they have this. So as I was saying, it's the story of not only her but her father, H.W. Clark, I believe was his name. And what I thought, and I told this one to my mom, and both of us went, wow. But if you stop and think about it, yeah, how they were saying how much of a lifetime her and her father spanned. They said when her father was born, the 8th president of the United States was in office. I'm sorry, I don't remember who that is. I am Canadian. I don't know all the presidents. I know who the current one and the last couple were, but to go back into history, I don't know what order they all came in. If you told me somebody's name, I would probably know that that was a president, but I don't know where they fell in the chain of command or in the lineage of presidents. So her dad was born or H.W. Clark was born when the 8th president was in office. And when she died, because she lived to be like 103 or 105 or something like that, President Obama was in office. Like, that is a ridiculous amount of time. But her dad was in his 60s when she was born. So, if you think about it, that's like a 160-year span, right? From the entire takeaway of that book, that's the fact I found the most interesting. I don't know why I did, but it stuck with me. But the amount of money that this woman spent on gifts that she gave to people, she loved dolls, and she would hire these people out to make these elaborate doll houses. She spent the last 20 years of her life living in a hospital in New York City. She didn't have to. She owned like 5 properties, like in Connecticut and in New York and in California, and she never lived in any of them. It was fascinating. If you are into at all history, especially history of individual people, like of the very wealthy, like if you're into like the Astors or the Rockefellers or anything at all like that. Like, he was contemporaries in a way of those people. So yeah, I mean, absolutely fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it on audio if you get a chance to listen to it on audio. I don't know if Scribd has it, but like I said, my library had a copy of it on audio, so maybe check your Overdrive and see whether or not they have it. But yeah, I absolutely recommend this book. The next book that I finished was another nonfiction November read, and this was Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. Nonfiction memoir. In a way, it was a series of essays. So it wasn't a memoir per se where the person is talking about their life from like when they were a child and what have you. But these are memoirs about things that kind of went on in her everyday life. If you're looking for more of a memoir of Jenny Lawson, I recommend that you check out her first book, which is called Let's Pretend This Never Happened, which I also read a couple years ago and I loved. So Furiously Happy is actually a reread for me. I read this one first, then I went back and read Let's Pretend This Never Happened. But I really wanted to do a reread of Furiously Happy because I did love it so much. So the narrator on this one was Jenny Lawson herself, which was absolutely delightful. This book was published in 2015. Goodreads average rating of 3.92 stars. I gave this one 5 stars. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it as well. I really, really loved it. And for Nonfiction November, this was for the category of voice. Mainly because this is the author telling her own story. But because I also listened to it on audio, it was narrated in her voice. So that's how I fit the category for that one. Jenny Lawson, for those of you who don't know, is the bloggess. And I do follow her online. I've been following her for years. She suffers from several different mental issues. She has anxiety. She suffers from depression. There's a lot of things. And this book is essentially how she deals with her day-to-day life while trying to make the best of pretty much what life's handed her and what's happened. You know, she has a great husband and a great daughter, great parents. And, you know, these stories, these little essays, if you will, just made me laugh out loud. I mean, some of them are very poignant and, you know, very sad when she talks about being in the depths of depression. Or she also suffers from rheumatoid arthritis and what it's like to be in pain and to spend these days in bed and then the days after, you know, a flare-up, still not being able to do anything and how your family has to almost pick up the pieces. It's heartbreakingly sad at points, but also, as the title suggests, it's furiously happy. Like, she made the decision to do what she could to be the best that she could be, no matter these circumstances and obstacles. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I was sitting there on lunch, and I tend to listen to audiobooks when I'm on my lunch hour at work, and I'll knit on my sock and eat my lunch, and I'm multitasking. And I'd be sitting there giggling at certain points, and especially told by her, you know, if anyone's going to narrate this kind of book, it needs to be the author. In my opinion, I just think she did a great job. And I think there's an essay in here that she talks about how difficult it was for her to narrate this book, and to get over that anxiety that she had of screwing it up and messing it up, and, you know, realizing that she can just do it. Just, you know, you can do it kind of an idea. Really, really, for anyone who suffers from any sort of mental illness, I think this is a great book for you to check out. Even those who don't, thankfully I don't, and I think it really makes those of us who don't aware of what it's like for those who do. A peek behind the curtain, if you will. And I loved it. Like I said, 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The cover is just hysterical. I do have a copy of this in hardcover. I bought it when it was released originally, and that's when I first read it. But highly recommend this book. Like I said, I just loved it. I recommend Jenny Lawson to anybody. Check out her blog. Follow her on Instagram. She is an utter delight. The next one that I finished was The Cowboy's Christmas Baby by Cathy McDavid. This is a contemporary romance novel. It is book number 4 in the Sweetheart Ranch series. Harlequin Heartwarming number 307. This came out this year in 2019. Came out on November the 5th. Average rating on Goodreads of 4.36 stars. I gave it 4 stars. For my November Triple RC challenge, or my Romance Readers Reading Group challenge, this was my Reader's Choice novel. So a very special thanks to Harlequin and to the publisher for sending me an e-copy of this book to review for you guys. This book was so adorable. This is a sweet romance, so there is no adult content in here. Now, Adult content is alluded to because our two main characters, Jewel and Tanner, had a relationship a year before that resulted in her getting pregnant. Now, both of them work in the rodeo. She is a barrel racer, and I think he rides bulls. And his brother, at the very beginning, like the year earlier before this book started, his brother was very sick. He has a brain tumor. And the brother, for like the last thing, he was about to go in for this surgery, that it was like a 50% chance if he was going to survive or not. And he actually bribed the judges to let him win because he wanted one last championship before going under the knife, essentially. So the thing was, though, is that people believe that Tanner was the one who bribed the judge, not his brother Daniel. So Tanner, of course, took the heat for it. And when Jewel found out that he had done this, she was flabbergasted and broke up with him, not knowing at the time that she was pregnant. So she left. They went their separate ways. They broke up and went their separate ways. And now it's a year later, and by chance they have met back up again. She is working at this place called the Sweetheart Ranch in Arizona, and she is their new photographer for like weddings and events and things like that. And Tanner works at the neighboring ranch as like a ranch hand. So now it's a story of them coming back together again, also dealing with this lie or this cheating scandal that Jewel still doesn't know that Tanner isn't the one who did it. And, you know, dealing with this new baby. They've got a 4-month-old little girl named Ava, and, you know, how they're going to work together and work through this scandal that happened. Really, really great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love Cathy McDavid's writing. I'm a big fan of her work. I've been reading her for so many years. Back when she used to write the American romance books for Harlequin, which I do miss that line so much. But the Harlequin Heartwarming does fill that niche a little bit. And I do love that this is a clean romance. You know, I did come to realize, and I'll talk about this at the end, I did DNF a book this week. And, you know, I don't generally have a problem with adult content in books, but I do kind of prefer when it's not there. I like it there when it makes sense. But you don't always need it, and these books show that. And it was a really great story. For those of you, and I know there are a lot of you out there, bless you for watching me, for who don't read a lot of romance, check this one out. If you're you know, you're nervous about the whole adult content situation, definitely check out the Heartwarming line. It's absolutely fantastic. Check out Cathy McDavid. I'm trying to remember, and I can't specifically, whether or not any of her older books had adult content in it. If it does, it's very minimal, and it's nothing erotic or anything at all like that. It would be more of a behind closed doors kind of scene if they are there. But again, I can't remember. It's been a couple years since I've read one of her books, but this really gave me the urge to pick up more of her work. She writes predominantly cowboy romance, which is always a favorite of mine. The next book that I finished, speaking of stuff with no adult content, was The Bake Shop by Amy Clipston. This is an Amish romance. The narrator on this one was Lauren Bursett. This is book number 1 in the Amish Marketplace series. This book also came out on November the 5th. This was another NetGalley read. Goodreads average rating of 4.52 stars. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I didn't love it. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups, but I did thoroughly enjoy this one. So again, special thanks to NetGalley and the publisher for sending me an e-arc copy of this book to review. Yes, I did listen to it on audio, but I did get an e-arc copy of it, but I decided to go ahead and listen to it on audio. So yes, I like this book, but I didn't love it. I do enjoy the Amish romances. I think they're really delightful. They're a nice change of pace, a breath of fresh air, if you will, from a lot of the romance that I typically read. You know, they're delightful. They're really delightful. So this is the story of Christiana and Jeff. And both of them are Amish, and she runs a bake shop outside of her home, like a stand that her father built her. And she lives at home. She's in her early 20s with her dad and her mom and her younger sister Phoebe. And her cousins, her 3 cousins, own these booths at like this crafters farmers market kind of place. And at the beginning of the book, you find out that there's a booth available. So she asks her father, can I move my bake shop there? And he's hesitant because it's owned, this entire farmers market type place is owned by an Englisher, or someone who is non-Amish, essentially. And this takes place in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in the township of Bird in Hand. And I looked it up, and it is a legitimate place. It's a real place. It's a real Amish community in Pennsylvania, which I think is delightful. And I really want to go there because I'd love to see it. I love to go and shop at some of the Amish, like, stores owned by Amish people, and just to see, like, I think it would just be very, very a neat thing culturally to check out. Anyway, so her father finally relents, and he's like, okay, as long as you stick with your Amish ways, you know, like, he didn't want her using electricity in her booth and anything at all like that, and she agreed. Well, while she's there, she meets a man by the name of Jeff, and a year earlier, Jeff's fiance, like days before the wedding, broke it off with him. She was Amish, as the both of them were Amish. He built her a house, and she broke it off, you know, days before the wedding itself. So needless to say, he's been kind of carrying this around for the last year, wondering what he did wrong. And he starts off this friendship with Christiana, and the two of them are really delightful together. They're very, very sweet. They spend a lot of time getting to know each other. Of course, it's an Amish romance. It's going to be slow burn. You know, other than a few kisses, that's pretty much the extent of any kind of adult content in these books. But, I mean, it was delightful. My issue with it was the father's, because it's, with romance, as you guys are probably aware, for those of you who read it, it's usually, it's across all books. It's not just romance. But usually there's something that splits the couple apart towards the end. Like maybe they get together, but then they break up again before coming back together again. And it's usually an internal or external conflict. Either internally, something between the two of them, or externally, an external force breaking them apart. And in this case, it was external. It was her father. Because her father found out that Jeff used electricity to run his machine in his store. He makes wood carvings and leather work. And the father pretty much banned her from seeing him again. Now, there are more things in the background that I don't want to give away because they did come as a surprise to me as I was reading the book as to why the father was this strict with her. But the thing that got me, though, is that he had major issue with Jeff using this electricity to run this thing in his booth, but yet had no problem with his daughter, in a way, working at a Englisher's marketplace that had electricity. You know, I just found it very odd. Like, they use cars. They don't drive them personally. They have drivers who will drive them places. He seemed okay with that. He seemed okay with his daughters going to a restaurant, an Englisher's restaurant that has electricity and all these things. And my assumption is that they don't necessarily grow all their own food, you know, or slaughter all their own animals. I don't think so. I mean, it didn't talk about that in the book. But it sounds like in one scene, I think that they were eating potato chips with lunch. Well, where did those come from? You know, it just seemed very, I don't know. I think that was my thing with some of these Amish books, is that when you get like the old order Amish, or the ones that are very, very Amish, that it just seems like they're going against their own ways in a way by doing some of these other things. I know they can't completely go off the grid and, you know, step away completely from the English world, but I don't know. It's kind of like, really, you're going to get upset with her for using for her possible boyfriend using electricity, you know? And the other thing is, too, that I found, which was a little jarring, maybe it was because it was on audio, I don't know, but I found that the way that Christiana and her cousin spoke seemed to be very, not like, oh my God, how are you? Not like that, not Valley Girl, but they seemed to be very English. But then all of a sudden you get these Amish words, like it's a Pennsylvania Dutch or part German, you know, and it's like it was thrown in for authenticity in a way. But yeah, and I mean, in one scene, she's even reading a Christian, like, fiction book. And a part of me can't help but think, and I wonder if some of these Amish people, these are the things I think about when I read these kind of books, that I have to wonder if Amish people are ever end up in like some, I don't know, not like a Walmart per se, but maybe, I don't know. But if they're ever somewhere, or they're going past a used bookstore and they see one of these love-inspired or one of these Amish books, and if they pick it up and if they're ever interested in reading it, I don't know. I'd be so curious. Or someone who is ex-Amish who has read some of these, I think that I just want to know. So yeah, so I did enjoy it. If you enjoy Amish romance, Amy Clipston is a really great author. I just found the dad's reasoning to be just a little bit off-putting. I just felt that there could have been more. It was a rather weak excuse. Let's put it that way. But other than that, the characters were delightful. The story was very, very sweet. I love the cousins, so you know this is the first book in a series. You're now going to get the cousins' romances, which I'm very much looking forward to reading the rest of them. So yeah, again, if you are an Amish romance reader, I highly recommend this one. And the last book that I finished this week was Not Just the Girl Next Door by Stacy Connelly. This is a contemporary romance, of course. Book number 3 in the Forever Yours series. So it has to deal with little animals. You can tell by that little puppy dog on the cover. Harlequin Special Edition, number 2682. Published originally in 2019. This came out in March. Average rating on Goodreads of 4.14 stars. I gave this one 4 stars. For my challenges, this was my 40 Years of Harlequin book, of course, for March of 2019. So yes, I really, really loved this one so much. I thought it was so sweet and so adorable. So this is about Molly and Zeke, and Molly and Zeke have known each other since they were kids. Molly is Zeke's best friend's younger sister. So Molly's older brother's name was Patrick, and Patrick served in the army, and he was actually killed overseas a few years before the start of this book. And when Patrick went back overseas, he said to Zeke, take care of my little sister. So Zeke has always considered her to be hands-off. So that's the trope that's kind of running through this one is, you know, your best friend's younger sister kind of an idea. But as the story progresses, of course, he starts to see her in a different light. She is a dog trainer, which is how the animal aspect comes into this book. The entire series focuses around a pet shelter for cats and dogs. And yeah, this one was really, really sweet. I don't want to talk too much about the story, but I think you get the gist of, you know, the kind of a plot line you're going to get with this. It is it's a friends to lovers romance. It involves adorable puppy dogs. It involves other animals at an animal shelter. You know, I always find it hard reading about animals in shelters because I just want to run, even though it's fictional, I want to adopt all the fictional animals. Cats and dogs, I'm not biased. Molly and Zeke were both very, very sweet. I liked both of them, and, you know, the way they came together was very organic. You know, nothing felt forced. Nothing felt, like, out of place. It all made sense, like, you know, to suddenly see this person in a completely different light, and it does happen. And it works that way a lot of the times. And yeah, I thought it was very, very sweet. Very, very, very minimal on the adult content in this. I'm trying to remember, I don't think there was any in here. Stacy Connelly tends to write sweet romances, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, the entire series of the Forever Yours series, each one is written by a different author, which I always enjoy those because you really get a different voice for all of the different characters, and I really do like that. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one, and I highly recommend it if you get a chance to pick it up, especially if you're an animal lover. So anyway, guys, that is all that I have for this week. I do hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, or are there any that you're now interested in picking it up now that I have talked about them. And until my next video, everybody, take care and happy reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye, guys.